The empty chair beside Rachel Monroe felt louder than the wedding music. She stared at it, pretending not to notice the whispers floating across the reception hall. So, she really came alone. Her ex-fiancé, Tyler, stood only a few tables away greeting guests with his new bride, occasionally glancing toward Rachel as if waiting for her to leave. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and reached for her glass of water. That was when a calm male voice interrupted the silence. "May I sit here?" Rachel looked up. A tall man in a charcoal suit stood beside the empty chair, holding his own dinner plate. "There are plenty of empty tables," she replied politely. "There are," he said with an easy smile. "But this is the only one where someone looks like they'd rather disappear than eat dessert." Despite herself, Rachel laughed. Was I that obvious? Only to someone who's been there. Without waiting for attention from anyone else, he pulled out the chair and sat down. Across the ballroom, Tyler frowned. His new wife leaned closer. "Do you know him?" Tyler slowly shook his head. "No." "Then why is he sitting with Rachel?" Before Tyler could answer, the wedding photographer walked over. "Excuse me," he said to the stranger. "Would you mind moving? We need a family picture." The stranger smiled politely. "Of course." He stood immediately, making room without complaint. As he stepped aside, the hotel's banquet director hurried toward the photographer. He whispered something into the photographer's ear. The photographer's expression changed instantly. I'm sorry," he stammered. "Please, stay wherever you're comfortable." Rachel noticed the sudden change. So did Tyler. The stranger acted as though nothing unusual had happened. He simply picked up his fork again. "My name's Daniel," he said. "Rachel. It's nice to meet you." She studied him for a moment. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys weddings." "I don't," he admitted. "But sometimes showing up matters." Those words landed harder than he realized. Rachel had almost skipped this wedding 3 different times. She came for one reason only: to prove that one broken engagement wouldn't decide the rest of her life. 8 months earlier, Tyler had ended their 5-year relationship with a carefully rehearsed speech about growing in different directions. 6 weeks later, he announced his engagement to the daughter of a powerful real estate developer. Rachel stopped asking questions after that. She buried herself in her work as a museum curator, spending her days restoring forgotten paintings instead of thinking about forgotten promises. Healing had been slower than she expected. Tonight was supposed to be the final chapter. Instead, a stranger had quietly changed the evening with one simple question. "May I sit here?" As the band began another song, Daniel noticed Rachel absent-mindedly tracing the edge of the wedding invitation lying beside her plate. "You've been holding on to that all night." She smiled. "I restore old things for a living." "So throwing things away isn't easy." "Not always." He nodded, understanding more than she had actually said. Before either of them could continue, a woman in an elegant navy suit approached their table. She stopped just short of speaking. For the briefest moment, it looked as though she was about to address Daniel formally. Instead, she smiled politely. "I'm sorry to interrupt. When you have a moment, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." Daniel gave a small nod. "I'll find you later." The woman quietly walked away. Rachel watched her disappear into the crowd. That wasn't the way hotel staff usually spoke to ordinary guests. For the first time that evening, curiosity replaced embarrassment. Who exactly was the man who had chosen the empty chair beside her? Rachel expected Daniel to excuse himself after a few polite minutes. Instead, he remained exactly where he was, never trying to dominate the conversation or rescue her from the awkwardness surrounding the reception. He simply made the empty chair feel less empty. "So," he asked, cutting into a slice of wedding cake, "are you always this brave?" Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Brave?" Most people would have found an excuse to leave. She smiled faintly. "I almost did." "So why didn't you?" She looked toward the dance floor where Tyler was laughing with guests. "Because I was tired of letting someone else's decisions keep changing mine." Daniel nodded slowly. I understand that. The band announced a short break, and guests wandered toward the garden terrace overlooking the lake. Rachel welcomed the fresh air. Daniel followed a respectful distance behind, never assuming he was invited, only joining when she slowed her pace. I hope I'm not making your evening more complicated, he said. She laughed. Actually, you've made it easier. That's good. My relatives have stopped giving me sympathetic looks. They're too busy wondering who I am. Rachel smiled. They definitely are. As they reached the terrace, a little girl struggled to reach a balloon tangled in a flowering tree. Without hesitation, Rachel slipped off her heels and climbed onto a nearby stone bench. Careful, Daniel said instinctively. I've climbed worse things. She stretched, untied the ribbon, and handed the balloon back to the little girl. You saved it, the child squealed before running back to her parents. Daniel chuckled. You ignored my warning. I calculated the risk. So you're stubborn. I prefer determined. I'll remember that. She laughed. You remember everything. The important things. Their conversation drifted naturally. Rachel learned Daniel traveled often for work but avoided saying exactly what he did. He learned she spent her weekdays restoring paintings that museums considered too damaged to display. You repair forgotten masterpieces, he said. Sometimes. And when they're finished, people admire the painting, not the person who restored it. She shrugged. That's how it's supposed to be. Daniel looked thoughtful. I wish more people believed that. Inside the ballroom, Tyler noticed them laughing together. His new wife, Brooke, followed his gaze. You've looked outside 3 times. I'm just curious. About your ex. I've never seen her smile like that after we broke up. Brooke folded her arms. Maybe she's happier than you expected. Tyler didn't answer. When Rachel and Daniel returned inside, the master of ceremonies announced that every guest should sign the couple's memory book before leaving. Rachel opened it and hesitated. I have no idea what to write. Daniel glanced at the blank page. Then don't write what sounds polite. What should I write? The truth. She smiled before writing just one sentence. I hope your future is kinder than your past. Daniel read it and quietly nodded. That's generous. I've spent enough energy being angry. As Rachel closed the book, the hotel's event manager approached Daniel. Unlike the earlier staff member, he spoke confidently. Mr. Mercer, your reserved table is ready upstairs whenever you. He stopped mid-sentence after realizing Rachel was standing beside him. Daniel answered before the awkward silence grew longer. I won't need it. Very well. The manager nodded and walked away. Rachel looked at him. You had another table. I did. Then why are you sitting with me? Daniel smiled. It seemed like the better conversation. She wanted to ask why a guest would have a private table upstairs. Instead, she let the question go. A few minutes later, Tyler finally walked over. He forced a friendly smile. Rachel. Tyler. He turned toward Daniel. I don't think we've met. Daniel stood and offered his hand. We haven't. Tyler shook it, studying him carefully. I'm Tyler. I know. Rachel noticed the answer immediately. You know. Daniel looked at her. You mentioned his name earlier. Oh. That explained it. Or at least it should have. Yet something about Daniel's calm confidence made Tyler visibly uncomfortable. Trying to recover, Tyler smiled. Are you in town for business? Partly. What line of work? Daniel picked up his water glass. I spend most of my time helping people build things that last. Tyler laughed politely. Construction. Daniel smiled. Something like that. Rachel couldn't help noticing he had answered the question without really answering it. Again. Before Tyler could ask anything else, the same woman in the navy suit returned. This time, she walked directly to Daniel. I'm sorry, she said quietly. They've all arrived. Daniel checked his watch. I'll be there in a few minutes. She nodded and left. Rachel watched her disappear. Your evening seems busier than mine. He smiled. It wasn't supposed to be. She tilted her head. So why stay? Daniel looked directly at her. Because sometimes the most important meeting isn't the one on your schedule. Rachel looked away before he could see her smile. Across the ballroom, Tyler watched the exchange with growing unease. For the first time that night, Rachel wasn't thinking about the man she had lost. She was wondering about the stranger who kept giving her reasons to stay. Rachel watched Daniel excuse himself and disappear through a side hallway with the woman in the navy suit. For the first time that evening, she was alone again. Oddly, she didn't like it. She had known him for barely an hour, yet his quiet presence had made the wedding feel bearable. Rachel. She turned. Tyler stood beside her holding 2 champagne glasses. I thought we could talk. I don't think there's much left to say. He handed 1 glass toward her anyway. Just 5 minutes. She accepted it out of courtesy. I've got exactly 5. Tyler sighed. I didn't expect you to come. You invited me. I know. I just thought. What? You'd still be angry. Rachel smiled politely. I was. And now? I've learned anger is exhausting. Tyler looked toward the hallway where Daniel had disappeared. So, who is he? She laughed. I was hoping you'd tell me. You don't know. We met tonight. His eyebrows lifted. You met him tonight? Yes. And you're sitting together. Rachel shrugged. He asked if the seat was taken. Tyler looked unconvinced. That's all. That's all. Before Tyler could continue, the ballroom lights dimmed. The wedding planner stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, before dessert, we'd like to thank someone whose generosity made tonight's celebration possible. Rachel wasn't paying much attention until the planner continued. Our venue renovation, scholarship donation, and tonight's reception were all made possible through the support of Mercer Holdings. A large screen behind the stage lit up. The company logo appeared. Then, a photograph. Rachel's heart nearly stopped. It was Daniel, wearing the same calm smile. Beneath the photograph were the words, Daniel Mercer, founder and chief executive officer, Mercer Holdings. The entire ballroom erupted into applause. Rachel slowly looked toward the entrance. Daniel had just walked back into the room. Only now, every hotel manager, executive, and event coordinator immediately turned toward him. The planner smiled warmly. Mr. Mercer, would you please join us? Daniel hesitated. His eyes met Rachel's across the ballroom. He already knew what she had seen. He walked onto the stage. The applause continued. Daniel accepted the microphone. Thank you. His voice remained as calm as ever. But tonight belongs to the bride and groom. I only hope they enjoy a long and happy marriage. He returned the microphone almost immediately. No long speech. No mention of business. No attempt to impress anyone. He stepped off the stage and walked straight toward Rachel. She didn't wait for him to speak. CEO. He nodded. Yes. You own Mercer Holdings. I do. You knew exactly who you were the whole evening. I did. And you never thought I deserved to know. Daniel took a slow breath. I wanted you to know me before my title. Rachel looked at him quietly. You made that decision for me. I know. You enjoyed being treated like an ordinary guest. But I never got the chance to choose whether your success mattered. He didn't argue. Because she was right. Tyler approached again, this time looking noticeably nervous. Mr. Mercer. Daniel turned politely. Daniel is fine. Tyler forced a smile. I didn't realize Mercer Holdings owned the hotel. We do. I'd love to schedule a meeting sometime. Rachel watched the conversation unfold. Only 30 minutes earlier, Tyler had barely acknowledged Daniel. Now his entire attitude had changed. Daniel noticed it too. I'm afraid business can wait. Tyler nodded awkwardly and stepped back. Rachel looked at Daniel again. So this is what you meant? What? When you said people treat you differently. He glanced around the ballroom. Guests who had ignored him earlier were suddenly smiling. People whispered. Several executives waited nearby, hoping for a moment of his attention. Yes. This is exactly what I meant. Rachel looked down at the wedding invitation still resting in her hand. She slowly folded it in half. I liked talking to the man who sat beside me because I looked lonely. She met his eyes. I don't know what to do with the man everyone suddenly wants. Daniel's expression softened. They are the same person. Maybe. She shook her head gently. But you never trusted me enough to let me discover that honestly. Without another word, Rachel placed the folded wedding invitation on the table between them. I think it's time for me to go. She turned toward the ballroom exit. Daniel didn't stop her. For the first time in years, being one of the wealthiest men in the room meant absolutely nothing. Because the only person whose opinion mattered was quietly walking away. Rachel drove home without looking back. She wasn't angry because Daniel was wealthy. She was hurt because, for one evening, she had believed every conversation between them had been completely equal. Instead, one of them had always known far more than the other. For the next 3 weeks, she buried herself in work at the museum. An upcoming exhibition needed restoring, and she volunteered for every extra shift she could. Whenever her co-workers mentioned the Mercer Foundation, the exhibition's largest sponsor, Rachel quietly changed the subject. Daniel never appeared. He never called. He never sent flowers. He never used his influence to arrange another meeting. The only thing she received was a handwritten envelope delivered to the museum. Inside was a single note. You were right. I trusted your kindness but not your ability to choose the truth. I can't change that mistake, so I won't ask you to forgive it. I only hope one day you'll remember the conversation, not the title. Daniel. Rachel folded the letter and slipped it into her notebook. She didn't answer. A month later, the museum held the private opening of its newest exhibition. Collectors, artists, and donors filled the gallery. Rachel stood beside the painting she had spent months restoring. The museum director stepped onto the stage. Tonight we'd also like to recognize the donor who made this restoration possible. Rachel looked toward the audience. Daniel walked into the gallery. Not surrounded by executives. Not with photographers. Just quietly. The applause faded as he took the microphone. I only donated the funds, he said. The real credit belongs to the people who brought these paintings back to life. He turned toward Rachel. Especially the woman who refused special treatment, even when she didn't know she already had my respect. He immediately handed the microphone back. No long speech. No public declaration. No attempt to embarrass her. Just the truth. After the ceremony, Rachel stepped onto the museum's rooftop terrace. A few minutes later, Daniel joined her. I hope I'm not interrupting. She smiled faintly. You actually asked this time. I've learned. For a moment they stood overlooking the city lights. Finally Rachel spoke. I read your letter. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. He nodded. I would have understood. She looked at him. I kept asking myself one question. What was it? If you weren't a billionaire, would I still have liked you? Daniel smiled softly. And? Rachel laughed. I already did. His smile faded into something more sincere. Then let me answer the question I've been asking myself. She waited. If you had known who I was from the beginning, would I still have had the courage to sit beside you? Rachel thought for a second. Maybe not. Exactly. He looked toward the skyline. I've spent years believing my title protects me. It doesn't. Sometimes it only keeps people away. She stepped closer. And you've spent years deciding for people instead of trusting them. You're right. I did. No excuses. No explanations. I was wrong. Rachel noticed something important. For the first time, he wasn't trying to convince her. He was simply accepting responsibility. She reached into her purse and pulled out the folded wedding invitation she had never thrown away. "I kept this." Daniel smiled. "I noticed you folded it before leaving. I almost threw it away. But then I realized. It wasn't the wedding I wanted to remember. It was the conversation over dinner." She handed him the invitation. "Would you keep it?" He looked surprised. "Why?" "So the next time you meet someone worth knowing, you'll remember that honesty should arrive before introductions." He laughed quietly. "I think I've finally learned that lesson." Rachel extended her hand. "Hi. I'm Rachel." He smiled, understanding exactly what she was doing. He took her hand. "Hi. I'm Daniel Mercer." No secrets this time. No secrets. She looked into his eyes. "So, you still owe me one dinner." He laughed. "I thought I already bought you one. You sat beside me at someone else's wedding. That doesn't count." "What does?" Rachel smiled. "A table. Chosen because we both want to be there." Daniel offered his arm. "This time. May I walk beside you?" She slipped her hand through his arm. "I'd like that." Together they walked back into the museum, leaving the rooftop behind. Months later, they often laughed about the strangest first date either of them had ever experienced. It had started with an empty chair at an ex's wedding, and ended with two people finally choosing each other without secrets, expectations, or titles standing between them. Subscribe for more unforgettable billionaire romance stories.